Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and now presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on November 20th, 2020, and is current through the Star Trek Discovery episode Scavengers, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 6 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is William Overton. William, welcome to WeeklyTrek.
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here.
All right, William. Well, I ask my guests this question every week. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
You know, I think you really hit kind of the crux of everything going on in your intro that you do every week about this golden age of Star Trek we're in. And I think rather than pick just kind of one in-franchise thing that I'm excited about, I'm really excited about this moment we're in where Star Trek is kind of allowing people to create community, whether it be like the online community or connections with family and friends. Star Trek is such a hopeful franchise, and we really need that in 2020. You know, I think it's been a rough year for everyone, and Star Trek has been one of those lights in the darkness, you know. And for me personally, I was too young to watch the Berman era show's first run. And so, you know, I was always catching it on VHS and having my dad screen Insurrection in theaters before allowing me to go. And so getting to watch it first run and share it with my family who introduced it to me, and now share it with my wife who I introduced to Star Trek, and it's our, you know, appointment TV every week. It's just been amazing. And I think it just adds such an exciting personal layer onto that. And I know every fan has got that same kind of story where Star Trek is more than just the franchise and what's happening. You know, it's getting to sit down with friends or family and watch it every week, or, you know, during a pandemic, recap it over the phone or over Zoom. And that's really what's got me super excited about the franchise and the 23 weeks of straight Star Trek that we're in right now.
That's terrific. And do you have a highlight or a personal favorite moment from the dumpster fire that has otherwise been 2020?
So I have a personal favorite moment. I got married this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So my wife and I, we had our wedding planned for June, and it ended up just being family. You know, we had to scrap the rest of it, which turned out to be just really special. And so that was wonderful.
Did you manage to sneak any Star Trek touches in?
I did not sneak any Star Trek touches in. I did not. We joked about doing, you know, like walking into a song from like one of my favorite sci-fi franchises, but, you know, we didn't go through with it.
You have to save that for the big party next year, right? Once you can have all the guests you were going to have.
Bingo. I'll play some Goldsmith. Yeah.
That's delightful. Well, the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is there have been a lot of books released lately. We talked about this on an episode a couple of weeks ago. There are a lot of books out, and I finally finished the autobiography of Captain Janeway. You know, supposedly by Captain Janeway. Of course, it's actually by Una McCormack, and I really enjoyed it. It's the third in Titan's line of autobiographies that they've produced. They did one for Kirk. They did one for Picard. Those were written by David A. Goodman, the Orville producer who used to work on the Berman era of Star Trek. But now they've got this Janeway one that just came out, and then Una McCormack is she's basically taken over for David Goodman. He was going to do a Spock autobiography, but it looks like Una's taken over that one. It's a really nice kind of look into the mind of Captain Janeway, hearing about her life and her experiences in Delta Quadrant before and a little bit after. In her own words, I don't think there are any Prodigy spoilers in there. At least I couldn't find any, despite reading very much between the lines. And it does feel a little more sort of corporately canon constricted than the Kirk and Picard ones did, which were a little more imaginative in places and sort of played with the canon some. But I think, you know, now Star Trek's back on TV, it's pretty much to be expected that not going to do too many sort of mold breaking kind of ideas. Like I remember in the Picard one, David A. Goodman explained the fact that we hadn't seen denobulans in any of the Star Trek's after Star Trek Enterprise was because the whole planet decided they were going to go live in a in like a different dimension, and so they just sort of exited the Prime universe, and that was the end of it.
That's wild.
Yeah, wild, imaginative, and very fun. Nothing like that in the autobiography of Captain Janeway, but
yeah,
it is still a very good read, and so I highly recommend it.
Oh, that's amazing. I haven't picked up any of those autobiographies, but I mean, what a fun way to get that insight into your favorite characters. And I feel like this has really been kind of the year of Janeway on the side and the year of Voyager, with it being the 25th anniversary.
All right, well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Last week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, Die Trying, saw the apparent exit of fan favorite and all-around badass security officer, Lieutenant Commander Nhan from Star Trek Discovery. Ryan Britt, reporting for Den of Geek, published an interview with the Nhan actress, Rachael Ancheril, following the episode's broadcast. The biggest news out of the interview? Ancheril's mum is a massive Star Trek fan and was part of the legions of fans who wrote to NBC and staved off cancellation for the original series at the end of season 2. My mom was one of the people who wrote a letter to tell NBC not to cancel the original Trek, Ancheril said. When I was a kid, she had this pink suitcase she would take out that had all her treasures in it, including autographs from all the original Trek actors on their headshots. Ancheril said she knew going into season 3 that Nhan would be leaving Discovery relatively early on. Gratefully, I wasn't surprised by it. I knew this was coming even before we started shooting that season, she said, but it was still hard for me. I tried to be professional in the read-through. I'd read the script several times before we got to the read-through, and I was still choking up before we got to say the words. I was sobbing as I was reading the words. I could barely get them out, and I think that's a testament to Sean Cochran's writing. It hit me. I hope it does the same for fans. But to give you some sense of hope that we might not have seen the last of the Barzan security officer, Ancheril would not tell Ryan Britt whether this would in fact be her last appearance as Nhan, potentially implying, though obviously not confirming, that the character might make a return to the show later in this season or in season 4. Ancheril also recounted how, on her last day of filming, the Discovery cast and crew clapped her out for the last time by singing a modified version of the song Na Na Hey Hey Kissing Goodbye, which I promise I won't sing to save my listeners, but obviously with the Na Na changed to Na Nan. William, were you a fan of Nhan, and do you think we'll see her again?
I was a fan of Nhan, and I think she's really representative of what a good job the Discovery writers have been doing since really in season 2 and picking up in season 3 at fleshing out these background characters and really expanding our ensemble. I think Nhan is one of the perfect examples of that. And she's a race you don't know a whole lot about, being a Barzan. I'm really intrigued by this Barzan view of death. I hope we learn more about that. And you know, I mean, they elevated her to the credits, right? She was like a regular for the first couple of episodes.
Yep, that's right.
And so I feel like there's no way that they don't bring this character back. I think they've invested a lot in her, and I think that's a testament to what the writers are doing. And under Michelle Paradise's direction, I love it. I love these background characters getting fleshed out.
I am convinced that the character returns at some point, even if they have not ultimately yet kind of decided to do so. You know, Discovery is going to stick around in the 32nd century, presumably for as long as the series itself now lasts. And I can't imagine they would not take the opportunity to bring back Nhan for something. We know that Barzan is one of the few worlds that's still part of the Federation, and the character didn't die, right? I mean, she decided in the interest of Starfleet and the Federation to sort of stick around and help continue this important mission of protecting the Tikov. And so I am 100% convinced that we will see her again, but it's also nice because one of the things that never rang true to me about the 37s, that episode of Star Trek Voyager that opens the second season where they encounter Amelia Earhart and this colony of humans who have, built these cities, and they offer the Voyager crew an opportunity to stay. And Janeway says, anybody who wants to get off the ship, go to Cargo Bay 2 at this particular time. And her and Chakotay go down there wondering who's going to be in the cargo bay, and the doors open and there's nobody there. Like, that never felt authentic to me. It's a nice moment, for that character, and it's a nice sort of signal of confidence from the crew. But like, you're telling me that the 250 people there wasn't anybody who was like, you know what, I don't really have anything waiting for me at home. I might as well just stick around here rather than risk the next 75 years in the Delta Quadrant and all of the things that could have come with it. So it is nice for Discovery. They're in this new time frame. They're in this new environment. That there is a character who says, you know what, based on everything I've experienced, I think now there's a different calling for me to do this rather than continue to stick around on the ship.
Yeah, and it gives our crew on the ship a connection to this new century that we're in. That's not just Starfleet Command or book. It's, oh, now we have somewhere else who we can go and we can see and we can reconnect with and help kind of flesh out this new era of Star Trek that we're about to see for hopefully years to come.
Yeah, that's a great point, because off camera, Nhan is going to be developing her own viewpoint of what's going on, learning her own things about what it means to be in the 32nd century. And that might ultimately end up being a useful plot point at some point in the future, given that, Discovery is one ship and we're ultimately only going to get a relatively sort of limited view, slice of life of what the 32nd century looks like, because it'll just be based on sort of where does the ship go and when. Well, next week, Hero Collector Publishing will be releasing Star Trek Voyager: A Celebration by Ben Robinson and Mark Wright. Robinson, who is most known for his job leading the Star Trek Starships collection, actually got his start in publishing and is making a triumphant return to the medium with a book that goes behind the scenes on Star Trek Voyager to celebrate its 25th anniversary. And this is not the story we're talking about, but if you do want a preview of the upcoming line of Hero Collector Publishing, I actually did an interview with Ben over at TrekCore.com that talks not just about Voyager Celebration, but also the Cocktails book, the Spock Mindfulness book, and the Quibbles for Tribbles book. So please go ahead and check that out. But in an interview with SyFy Wire, Robinson talked about how 2020 was supposed to be the year for major celebrations of Voyager's 25th anniversary at conventions around the world. And this book, he said, the Voyager Celebration, was his attempt to, quote, get in on the act and do the greatest possible convention in book form. Even the best convention wouldn't have everybody, and we could. We've got all the principal cast members, all the writers and producers and heads of department. It's a pretty impressive roster. Between us, Mark and I did over 30 interviews covering every aspect of the show. I think also Voyager has never really had a big, substantial book that's been able to look at the series as a whole. There's a lot to say about it, and it's good to be able to fill that gap. In the end, because of COVID, there weren't really any conventions, so we have become rather important. In addition to sections diving deep into Kate Mulgrew's and the Voyager producers' feelings about the casting and responsibilities associated with the series showcasing Star Trek's first female captain, Robinson also reveals that his book is the first to provide the full story behind Jennifer Lean, who played Kes' departure from Voyager. The other significant thing is that for the first time, at least in an official publication, we've been able to talk about what really happened with Jennifer Lean, Robinson said. It's a very sad story. There's been a lot of avoiding the subject and repeating an official line over the years, but essentially, she was very troubled and became unreliable, which led them to ending her contract. Everyone was very thoughtful and considerate about what is obviously a very sensitive subject, and it feels right that we've finally been able to admit what happened, and I'm very grateful that the team at CBS let us tell that story. Other fun stories Ben says to watch out for in the book include, quote, the time they set Robbie Duncan McNeil's pants on fire, Ethan Phillips' encounter with Robin Williams on his way to the set, and the guy who kept pitching the writing staff stories that involved Debbie Harry. William, do you have any interest in reading this book about Star Trek Voyager? Were you a Voyager fan growing up?
I like Voyager. I think TNG and DS9 were my preferred 90s era shows, but I think Voyager has a whole lot going for it. I have both the TNG and the DS9 companions, which I think is what Ben is referring to in this interview is, those are kind of the definitive looks at those shows.
Yep.
And Voyager just didn't get that with its companion, which is slim, compared to the others. So I think it's super exciting that they're going in and telling this behind the scenes story of this show. And from such a different perspective from when those other companions were written too. These folks have 25 years of perspective on what happened and how they feel about it. So it's both, it's looking back at them on that time and also giving them a chance to talk about what the show means kind of in that context. And obviously that's super important for Voyager, having the first female lead in the franchise. So I love it. I think it's awesome.
And he's totally right that, this was supposed to be the big year of Star Trek Voyager's 25th anniversary celebration, kicking off with the Star Trek cruise in February, which did happen, but then it was going to be Destination Star Trek Germany in May, Star Trek Las Vegas in August, Destination Star Trek London in November. That was supposed to have been last weekend. And of course, none of those conventions ultimately happened. And so we sort of have missed out this year on that kind of celebratory aspect of Star Trek Voyager. And so we've all sort of had to figure out different ways of doing the things we want to do. And if in lieu of going to a convention, given we're in the middle of a global pandemic, we can get that kind of experience and that kind of insight from a book, like that's fabulous too.
Absolutely. I also think, to your point about what this year could have been, I think the cast has done a really good job at kind of making the most of it. They've done virtual events. They seem to be kind of re-engaging in the franchise a lot. There's the podcast with Garrett Wang and Robbie Duncan McNeil.
Yep.
Like, they all seem excited about Star Trek and being a part of the Star Trek family, which is really fun. And obviously Jerry Ryan being back in Picard. So there's just so many Voyager connections right now in this year, even without that celebration. So I hope that, for the cast, I hope they get a chance to do some of these in-person appearances for them and for the fans in future years. But I love what they're doing, considering the circumstances that we're in right now.
And considering the circumstances we're in, as you say, I mean, they've done an absolutely stellar job of celebrating Voyager's 25th anniversary. We can only hope, given what a whiff Deep Space Nine's 25th anniversary was. I mean, we had the documentary, but that was about it. That by the time we get to DS9's 30th anniversary, they can give it the same kind of celebration.
I sure hope so.
Well, the Trek Collective have published a nice roundup of all the Christmas-themed Star Trek merchandise coming out for the festive season this year, so you can inject a little 24th century into your Yuletide joy. Leading the way this year are Fansets, who have announced their latest in their popular line of holiday pins. After last year's number one, the dog from Star Trek Picard in a Santa hat sold out in a matter of hours, this year Fansets have picked another popular character who has stolen the hearts of Star Trek fans, and that character is Badgie from Star Trek Lower Decks. Complete with a Santa hat and a demonic grin, the Badgie Christmas pin will be available in December. And if you're looking for the perfect Christmas sweater to add your sinister Badgie Christmas pin to, there are new options for you to consider. Star Trek licensee Numbskull have released an original series and a Next Generation Christmas sweater. The Next Generation version is a festive twist on the TNG uniform with a subtle Christmas pattern overlaid over the black shoulders and red uniform colors. So if you look at it from a distance, basically just looks like a TNG uniform top. You get closer and you start to realize, there's all this sort of traditional kind of Christmas sweater design that are quite subtly overlaid on top of it. I will say, if you're interested in that, as I was too, get yourself to Amazon or to the Geek store as quickly as possible, because I noticed that some of the sizes have started to sell out. The original series sweater, meanwhile, is certainly more garish. It features stylized depictions of Kirk and Spock and the tagline, "Beam me up, Santa." Well, the StarTrek.com online store are also getting into the Christmas sweater business with a red and green Merry Trekmas sweater featuring the Starfleet Delta and a Trek the Halls sweater featuring the USS Enterprise. There really are a lot of options if you are an ugly Christmas sweater fan. And because it's 2020 and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, the Star Trek store are also offering a line of Star Trek Christmas-themed face masks. Proceeds from the sale of the masks go towards feeding America's COVID-19 relief fund. William, if you celebrate the Yuletide season, do you think you will be picking up any of these festive Star Trek items?
Well, I think it's hard to go wrong with this Badgie pin, Badgie might be the character of the year in 2020.
For
He's
sure.
so wonderful. Clippy was referenced in a work call today, and I was just like, oh my gosh, Badgie. Oh my gosh, Badgie. I love the Picard sweater. And I'm a huge fan of this Make It Snow mask. And what I really want to know is what came first, Make It Snow Christmas attire or that wonderful YouTube video that I subject all of my loved ones to every year with Picard singing Make It Snow?
I think the YouTube video came first. Yeah. I will confess, I own that Make It Snow pattern, not on the face mask. I actually got it on a t-shirt and I got it last year, I think, for Christmas.
Oh, that is excellent.
But I think that Make It Snow video at this point has been around 4 or 5 years, and the Star Trek store has not been in the business of putting out topical merchandise all that long. So I'm gonna lay a safe bet that one came first.
Yeah, Alex, which one are you gonna be picking up this year?
So I wanted the like TNG uniform top one. Problem is they sold out in like the 2 sizes that are closest to me. I'm hoping they restock it, and it seems like they sold pretty quickly because I think they were only up on the web for about a week before they started selling out on Amazon and through the other retailer they were available through. The other sweaters are all still very much available, and if you're a smaller size, which I am not, you can still get the Picard uniform top version. I actually have one already, which, because I'm British, I travel home for the holidays most years, not this year obviously, and there was a German licensee that was selling a very nice Christmas sweater, which was also a Make It Snow sweater, but it was in the sort of red and black of the TNG. It was not in the sort of uniform style, but it was the same sort of colors. And it was the nicest I had seen to that point. So I have that one. So I don't know that I will be adding any more because I don't feel like I need more than like 1 or 2 Christmas sweaters for the Yuletide season. But I definitely think I'm going in for that Badgie fan sets pin if I can get there in time, because it will sell out quickly.
Yeah. Well, Alex, you can always reconsider the garish Beam Me Up Santa sweater to add to your collection.
I certainly can. I think I would probably get kicked out of the house if I did that. And lastly, Eaglemoss have released a TrekCore first looks at some of their new Starship models coming early next year. In February of 2021, can't believe we're that close already, Eaglemoss will be releasing an XL version of the Delta Flyer from Star Trek Voyager, following up on the regular size model, which was released all the way back in 2015. And this will be a big model of the Delta Flyer, coming in at 11 inches or almost 1 foot long. In addition to the Delta Flyer, the Star Trek Discovery Starships collection will be releasing the Section 31 Hu Yi class, which was seen in the season 2 finale of the show. This will be issue 32 in the collection, the penultimate Star Trek Discovery release before that collection ends, and is replaced by a Star Trek Universe collection, which will cover the ships from Picard, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds. And for fans of Star Trek Online, the 11th release in that series will be the USS Avenger. The Star Trek Online collection has been extended beyond the initial run of 10 issues, so look for more STO ship releases in the future if that's your thing. William, do you own any of the Eaglemoss models?
I do. I love the Eaglemoss models. I think it's hard to not love the Eaglemoss models.
All right, come clean. How many do you have?
I think I only have like 30. So I've got quite a few. Yeah. When it first came out, we'd been in this drought of good spaceships from Star Trek for a long time. There were those Diamond Select ships, which are great. But as soon as they announced that the Starship collection, starting with the Enterprise D and just like all the classic Federation ships right up there up front, it was hard to not jump on board. And I can't believe that Delta Flyer, the original size one, came out in 2015. I can't believe that Eaglemoss has been doing this for so long. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I was an original subscriber to the collection, and I think at this point that was 2013.
That sounds right.
Was when that first came out. Which are your favorites that you own?
That I own? Well, so I have a lot of them are still at my parents' house because I just don't have room. But with me, I have kind of my core 90s ships. I've got the Enterprise D, the Enterprise E, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine.
Very nice. Regular sized or XL?
All regular sized. I haven't ventured into the XLs yet. And like every once in a while, I will put them in a cart online. I'll be like, today's the day. And I haven't pulled the trigger.
Hey, who knows, if they've got a good enough deal for Black Friday, it might suck you in.
That is too true. That is too true. How many are in your collection, Alex?
I own pretty much them all.
I love it.
So I have all 180 issues. Well, no, I have 179 out of 180 issues. I have 178 out of 180 issues from the sort of regular subscription, because they skipped a couple because they were out of stock, and I haven't managed to pick them up on the secondary market yet because I refuse to pay $70 for USS Antares. I have all the Discoveries. I have most of the XLs. There are a couple that I'm not interested in getting, and I have some of the like bonus sort of concept-y ships, but not all of those. So I'd say, but even with the ones I don't have, I would say I probably have about between 90 and 95% of everything they've sold over the last few years. So yeah, they're sitting on a house deposit from me right there.
That's excellent. I love Eagle Moss's. I love that they're doing these new shows so quickly after they air. And it's all these background ships that we get these just amazing up close looks at, like these Section 31 ships. It was hard to see them, like when the show aired. And so it's awesome to get to see these designs that these artists spent so much time working on.
And it didn't make it into my interview with Ben, but he did tell me that it was actually Eaglemoss who were given the opportunity by CBS to name those Section 31 ship classes. So those are the official names.
Wow.
But because they did not appear on screen at any point, when Eaglemoss asked the question, what should we call these ships? CBS said, make a decision and let us know, and that'll be the name of the ships from now on.
Wow. That's so cool. I think that just is so illustrative of how respected the work that they're doing is in the community. That's awesome.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts. And now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So William, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm kind of interested in Discovery right now is what's going on with this music in the background. And I almost feel like maybe they're missing, Trek vet Ron Moore's creative consultant credit, because it feels very much like All Along the Watchtower from Battlestar Galactica.
It's in the fracking ship.
It's in the fracking ship. And so, I keep, I'm expecting Burnham, our red angel, to like decipher the code from the lullaby and, do a spore drive jump to a planet where we're going to find like Ron Moore reading National Geographic and saying, all this has happened before. But in all seriousness, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how they weave that in. They definitely tease this lullaby, this melody, as something that's going to come up again and might be important to where we're going this season. And I feel like there are a couple of different directions where they might be able to take that. One kind of is that All Along the Watchtowerian vibe, where, it is kind of mystical and it's really connected in a way where there's like a side effect or it's a clue to what's going on. I think that's certainly a possibility and feels in line with the kind of storytelling that Discovery does. On the other hand, I think it could be interesting to use the melody in kind of more of a commentary on the Federation and on kind of where it is right now. I think it's this thread almost that's connecting these different cultures, right? We had the tall symbiote know it, and then this character at Starfleet headquarters know it from a totally different part of the galaxy. And right now we see a fractured galaxy in Discovery, and this is something that shows that all these fractured planets really aren't as different as maybe they think they are at this point, and they aren't as alone as they think they are.
I love that. Yeah, that's really interesting, because they have really sort of spent these first few episodes sort of building up this idea that everybody is quite, well separated and has gone in a different direction. I mean, like, just look at Earth in that third episode, right? So different from the Earth that we were expecting to find. I mean, similar in some ways, the tree was still there, different in others, they're not part of the Federation anymore. And so, yeah, that would be a really interesting thematic idea. I would imagine there is almost certainly some kind of burn-related, sort of connection to it, since that seems to be the mystery that they're playing out over the course of this season. But I do really like that idea as being a little more subtle in the way that they're approaching it and thinking about it and what it ultimately ends up meaning for, the situation in which Star Trek and Starfleet find themselves in.
Yeah, I'm excited to see whatever way they go with it, because I think, obviously the burn's important, and, the other thing is figuring out how to rebuild the Federation, how to operate, in this new world. I'm fascinated to see where they go with it, because it feels like something that hasn't really been done in Star Trek like that before.
Okay, so my theory is I don't think we're going to see any Klingons in Star Trek Discovery Season 3. We've seen a fair number of races already so far this season. We've seen the Andorians, we've seen the Orions, we've seen a couple of Cardassians, we've seen Allurian, we've seen Trills, all hanging around. And I think, it looks like next week's episode is going to involve Vulcans, probably Romulans as well. But I don't think we actually end up seeing Klingons in Season 3 history of Discovery for a couple of reasons. I think, one, there's been a lot of Klingons in season 1 and 2. I think they may be a little tired of the Klingon angle and maybe are looking to do some other stuff. And I honestly have not missed the inclusion of the Klingons in season 3 thus far. They did a lot of great work with that race in seasons 1 and 2, but like at no point in any of these episodes that have been like, you know what, this episode is missing? People spitting Klingon at each other for 10 minutes. But I also think, you know, they do ultimately need to make a decision about how they're going to do the depiction of the Klingons in this time period, right? From what we've been told on Star Trek Picard, if Worf shows up, he's going to look like Worf. He's not going to look like a Discovery Klingon. I think there is a little bit of like, what are they going to do if Klingons from 900 years in the future show up? Are they going to look like Discovery Klingons from the 23rd century, or are they going to look more like, you know, Worf-style Klingons from the TNG Berman era? And I think in lieu of having to make any decisions about that, and since there is so much galaxy that they could explore, I wonder if we're going to see Klingons. And it might even be the case that we discover that, you know, the Klingon Empire maybe doesn't exist anymore, and perhaps something happened in the 900 years where Klingons fell into a big civil war and they all killed each other. I mean, I doubt it's going to be anything quite that aggressive, but I think they will, given the first 2 seasons were so Klingon heavy, I think they will now downplay that race going forward. William, what do you think?
I think it's really interesting. I feel like that would be, I agree with you. I think that would be a really smart call for the show to kind of to refocus on these other parts of the franchise and all these other races. You know, we've seen glimpses of Cardassians. Obviously, we're seeing Vulcans and probably Romulans next week. And it's going to be fascinating to see those races fleshed out. When they do bring the Klingons back, I'll be interested to see how Discovery's crew reacts to how changed things are. And I guess, you know, they're reacting to how changed everyone is, you know, how relations are so different broadly. But because they were so, you know, that Klingon story was so important to this crew, I'll be interested to see kind of where they do end up taking that when in, you know, season 8 or whatever the Klingons show up. Would this be the first season where we don't see a Klingon even in the background, the first season of Star Trek?
That is an excellent question. Well, Voyager, you have Torres in every episode,
the whole time.
So that's out. Enterprise, you do have Klingon appearances in 1, 2. Do you have any in 3?
I don't know.
Klingons in season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise.
The Dura stuff wrapped in 2.
Right. It wrapped right at the season 2 finale. There may not have been any Klingons in that season. There's certainly none that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. So yeah, that might have been the most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that is the one season out of, I mean, since The Next Generation came back, you know,
yeah.
Deep Space Nine had them in every season. Next Generation had them in every season. So yeah, if they do manage to make it the whole season without a Klingon, they would join season 3 of Enterprise as being one of the only seasons that is Klingon free.
Well, I think that'd be really interesting. I'll be curious to see how that pans out this season.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, William Overton, for joining me today. William, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
You can find me on Twitter at WD Overton.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to TrekCore.com. Well, thank you, William. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.